Yins, listen up. My children, carefully to the Master's instructions. So begins, more or less, the opening of the Rule of Benedict. Y'all, if monks, might be asking yourself what kind of bootleg Yinzer translation I am using for the opening citation from Benedict's Rule. Others, hearers among us, might wonder why Appalachian grammar is being used to translate St. Benedict's opening Latin lines of his rule that was written in the early 500s. 1472 years later, after the day of his transitus, or his flight of his soul to heaven, it's doubtful in our minds, perhaps, that St. Benedict can be honored by me using bad grammar. It seems laughable, perhaps without purpose. However, in reply, the reading in the best editions of the Rule of Benedict begins with the term ausculta, or arguably absculta, or what might translate more colloquially as listen up. Benedict's plausible opening word ascoltare, or auscultare, sounds very much like the corrupted Latin otherwise known as Italian. And it's ascoltare, or listen, and is very far removed from writing in proper Latin that would have, or should have, received respect in his age. But this is not unlike the New Testament, is it? Bad grammar, a fisherman, but inspired somehow by the Spirit. Bad kitchen Latin of St. Benedict, and albeit bad Latin, although the Rule of Benedict was written in what is equivalent to today's Appalachian prose, only the Bible outranks the Rule of Benedict in the number of copies that were handwritten during the Roman and medieval periods until the advent of the printing press in Europe in the 15th century. The most proper English translation of Benedict's opening rule goes thusly, and I think without the drama. Listen, my children, carefully to the Master's instructions. Here Benedict began his exhortation to obedience, a preface, as it were, to his central steps to humility, by using an oblique citation from today's Proverbs readings that one of our Benedictine sisters just pronounced from this very place. The Proverbs reading says along these lines, "My child, if you accept my words and treasure up my commandments within you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding." While Proverbs, as Scripture wishes to provide the would-be sage with wisdom of the things of heaven, the abstractions, and the divine plan in the mind of God, Benedict, in his rule, conversely, wishes to provide the monks the practical road by which obedience and the practical virtue of humility lead to that very same heaven, the source of that very same wisdom. But what can I tell so many Benedictine monks and sisters about their patron that they have not, I suppose, already learned? I imagine that by now there is a classic study out there that God willing, you have all seen on the Rule of Benedict, namely that marvelous, very thick red book called the RB 1980, or the Rule of Benedict 1980, with its editor's notes by Timothy Fry, OSB, which hopefully every English-speaking and American Benedictine is quite proud of. It is likely, I would think, that postulants or novices or juniors have to get to know this book in English because it contains the origin, the sources, the background, and the life of Benedict and his rule. This unparalleled study of Benedict's rule would teach each and every monk and nun the origin of monasticism, its translation from the East to the West, its influence on Holy Benedict. Its superb edition in English and Latin shows us the influence of the rules of that great Eastern and Egyptian Saint Pachomius, the Eschatikon of Saint Basil the Great in Cappadocia, Asia Minor, present-day Turkey, the utter dependence of Benedict on St. John Cassian's Institutes, and Benedict's perfecting of the rule of the Master, anonymous, by means of so many biblical and patristic sources compacted into a tiny little rule. In fact, in the RB 1980, about that thick, you just have this itty-bitty part that's actually the rule. All the rest of it's sort of padding around it. Perhaps, then, an encomium to Benedict and an edification of the Benedictine brothers and sisters here present might occur through being enriched by an appeal to diversity. Archabbey Douglas honored the Byzantine Catholic Seminary and the Eastern tradition by inviting me, the academic dean, over the principal Eastern Catholic Seminary in North America to address you today. To address all of you on the celebration of Holy Benedict. What should an Eastern seminary or an Eastern professor or a priest serving so many years the Eastern churches, particularly what we call the Greek Church and the Greek Orthodox tradition, what should he know about Benedict? So, in the spirit of breathing with both lungs, if we recall John Paul II, who spoke of the necessity to understand that Holy Mother Church has two lungs, that of the East and that of the West. I hope that you will be pleased to know that there are indeed riches of Benedict's life and work that have been brought to Eastern Orthodoxy and its offshoot, which is called Byzantine or Eastern Catholicism, by the mere fact that it is still or has returned to communion with the Holy See formally. First, I turn to praise the Pope of Rome, St. Gregory the Great, who, some 50 years after the death of Benedict, wrote Holy Father Benedict's biography. While he undoubtedly filled in lacunae or missing areas of Benedict's life with some interesting biblical tropes of the age, Gregory's masterpiece entitled The Dialogues left the singular witness to the great life and deeds of Holy Father Benedict. But the story does not stop there. It is not merely that as Pope Gregory and as a monk on the Coelian Hill in Rome, and as one who cited explicitly from the Rule of Benedict and one who honored Benedict as Patriarch of Monks, that monasticism of the Benedictine rule eventually found seat in every part of Western Christendom, but it also found a seat in the East. The Greek Pope Zacharias, upon discovering Gregory's dialogues and the life and the holy virtues and the rule of Benedict, ordered it to be translated into the Greek language for what is oftentimes thought of as the Orthodox East, which is just Eastern Catholicism. It was after this translation that we see, in my mind, that Benedict, as in the Gospel, had all of the promises fulfilled to him, that he left everything and he received 100-fold. For he did not only receive the Western Church, but the Eastern Church as his proper possession for that holy road lined with the cloak of monks that led to heaven. He who left all things received 100-fold not only in this life, but in the monastic life of the order to come. Because this inspiring translation of the dialogues into the Greek language around 750 AD, first and foremost, led to the Holy Saint John the Hymnographer of Sicily, a Greek place, a Greek-speaking world of Sicily, to write an entire office, just like the office that we have been celebrating the last days in this basilica, in honor of Saint Benedict. Every hymn and every part of the office interspersed with hymns in honor of that Holy Father, though Greek and though writing in southern Italy in a context so very foreign to Western Catholicism. From there, going to Thessalonica, the place of Paul's journeys in 840 AD and receiving ordination, he assured that his beautiful hymns in honor of the Holy Father Benedict, so honored in the West, became known in the Greek East, such that he ensured that even today, on March 14th, sorry to mention that there were more important saints in the East, so he got dislodged from the 21st to the 14th. But don't worry, the story does not stop there, that Benedict gets displaced to the 14th of March. In Italy, the Greeks never forgot that he was so very important that a second feast day is celebrated in the south of Italy, what was once called Megali Hellas, or Great Greece, the Greek-speaking southern Italian places. And they celebrated this feast day along with you, Benedictines, on the 21st of March. Abbot Allegaern, who I don't even know who he was, and I don't expect you to know, but he was the abbot of Monte Cassino in 981. He invited and installed the great Greek saint, Nihilus of Rossano, who founded Grotta Ferrata, the longest standing Greek Orthodox, we would just simply call it a Greek Catholic monastery nowadays, which is still occupied by Greek monks just outside of Rome. Since 1000 or so, 1004 to be official, it has continuously been occupied by Greek monks, and the office of Saint Benedict has continuously been celebrated because Nihilus wrote a second office, matins and vespers, and all the hymns for the Mass in honor of Holy Benedict. Why? It was because Abbot Allegaern, upon encountering Holy Nihilus, saw in him a future saint and had a daughter house founded in the nearby Valle Luce, where this Greek Nihilus participated in the daily life of Monte Cassino, where he was then inspired to go and through the libraries of Monte Cassino to read the dialogues of Gregory, to read the Latin hymns in honor of Holy Benedict, and to compose an independent office drawn from the life and the deeds of Benedict. He couldn't get all 36 miracles into his compact office of matins. You can imagine how long that would take. It's already bad enough for us Byzantines. If you celebrated all of matins, it's about 5 hours. So, at any rate, he did compose, I think, around 12 or 16 miracles he got in there. And he ensured that this Grotta Ferrata community continues to honor Holy Benedict as the patriarch of Eastern and Western monks. In 1004, when an abbot who didn't remember that Nihilus was a good guy came, Nihilus knew it was time to get out of town. So he moved a little bit closer to Rome, but he never forgot the love of Monte Cassino and Saint Benedict and that holy abbot Allegaern, who had been so beneficial to him. And he composed this office, and I will give you a translation, which I am privileged to present to you, that is the very beginning lines from about 985 or so, by Nihilus, in honor of Benedict, who is properly called the legislator of Greek and Latin monks. First, due to the monastery built at the tomb of Father Benedict in Monte Cassino. Then, as we inform, because of the hospitality to ascetics of both rites at Valle Luce for Nihilus and his own monks, so that he, with his brothers, seems to be under the very rule of that same Benedict. That is the blossoming of Benedictine hospitality, at least under Allegaern. And that led to this great office being composed. And I will finish up my homily for today by giving you just a taste of one of the beautiful hymns that was composed around the year 985 in honor of your Holy Father. Imagine, though, before we get to this, if we were in a basilica facing east and west, like all Eastern churches are by law to be built, and we are praying matins in which the only light is the light shining in, without electricity, albeit a great and helpful thing, if we were still praying matins according to the sun telling us when to pray them, we would have these beautiful matins hymns, one of which I'm about to share with you. Imagine that the light is shining on the altar and in your face right now, from the east window of the rising sun. It is at this moment of matins that we would begin singing in Grotta Ferrata, southern Italy, Nihilus's Greek monastery, therein, in the west country of Italy, versus the mother country of in the east of Greece, on this March 21st day, the hymn called a Kontakion. And now I present it to you. Like the sun for the west, the Father Benedict, you, O Benedict, sprung, illuminating with the light of your virtues the edge of the very empire. Rome glorifies herself through your life. Nursia chants your childhood, and the whole of Campania applauds. May Italy dance with joy. May Monte Cassino rejoice, exulting for having his tomb. This is how the Greek monks in the West obeyed St. Paul's rule in the Ephesians reading of today. In the 18th verse, which, if it had been added, would say that we are to pray without ceasing, by making sure that Holy Benedict, as part of the Byzantine office in East and West, the divine praises, the prayer without ceasing, does not neglect to ask for the help in the divine praises of Holy Father Benedict. After Nihilus, whom I've just mentioned, after he wrote an office for the entire Byzantine world, Italian monks from southern Italy, from the coast of Amalfi, became the first that were attracted to the East, no longer the East attracted by the West. The founder of modern-day Orthodoxy, the spiritual center of the Orthodox world, is on Mount Athos, and the great saint honored in both the Eastern Catholic and Orthodox churches is Saint Athanasius of Athos. He attracted Leo the Benedictine with the help of another Athos monk and 6 companions to go from Benevento and to found a monastery on the very holy mountain, which is the sacred place of Orthodoxy today. Soon, by about the year 1000, he was joined by Italian colonists in nearby Constantinople. The Amalfi House monastery got to such prestigious depths of respect on the holy mountain that it ranked 5th among dozens of monasteries in its voting rights on the holy mountain. And it endured over 300 years from its foundation date, slightly before the year 1000. What does this mean? Between monks, when Cardinal Humbert was picking a fight with a patriarch in Constantinople that he did not like, monks could care less. From the year 980s and 90s all the way to the year 1287, the Benedictines on the Holy Mountain, as Latins, were in happy communion with the Greek Orthodox on the mountain and shared, as they often would thereafter, communion with each other and voting rights in the same monastic confederation. The schism was something of political power, but monasticism spoke to obedience and fasting and vigils and prayer and holiness. There was no break of communion. It's just that they ran out of Latins because some Turks came by and made it a little difficult to populate the monastery anymore, so that the monastery of the Latins was incorporated, not excommunicated, but incorporated into the great Laura, or Lavra as it is called, monastery in 1287 on the Holy Mountain. This led to the permanent fixture in the empire of Benedict's glory. Basil, the emperor of the Eastern Romans, or the Byzantine emperor, called Porphyrogenitus, or purple-clothed, officially entered in the name of Benedict into the official calendar of the Byzantine East in the 11th century, and so it has stayed until this day. In fact, the great gift of Benedict in the East, by means of his life and his dialogues, was the very theological source for the discussions in the years 1438 and 1439 on the fate of the afterlife. That is, Benedict was argued by the Greeks against the Latins, who were being a little too contentious, if you want to ask an Easterner, at the Council of Florence, and a little bit too interested in purgatory as a place of suffering and not as a place of some sort of simply, we might call it a waiting room for heaven. That Holy Benedict and his visions of the afterlife, and the Holy Scholastica and her experience of vision, and Benedict's own experiences with his monks of the dead being raised again, and the various miracles and the dialogues were used by the Greeks in the discussions with the Latins to show them that not everything in the afterlife is a bunch of hot people jumping around wishing that they were somewhere else. And so what it ended up happening was a compromise formula was reached at the Council of Florence, where both the Greeks and the Latins could agree to omit any mention of fire as a dogmatic principle of union, and to simply mention that in the afterlife, whatever purification, metaphorically speaking, takes place, it does not involve any physical torture necessarily, but only perhaps some or another waiting that is painful, because we are left deprived of the vision of the face of God, whether it be, in our language, in time or in the language of abstraction, in the state that we are, we might say, bereft of any experience of consolation. And so even here, after the invention of the Latin University in 1215, after the multiplication of many Latin arguments by logic, it was only Holy Benedict that led to an agreed-upon formula in his dialogues between Latins and Greeks in order to understand that the afterlife is a place of peace and of repose, more than a place of punishment. I leave off then, remembering so many great things of Benedict and his rule, by quoting now to you, in conclusion, a beautiful hymn sung in honor of the Rule of Benedict. The only Greek translation of the Rule of Benedict in the Greek language is in the form of beautiful poetry summarizing the rule in the Matins office that is sung by the Greeks on this 21st day in the morning in Grotta Ferrata in southern Italy. Let's listen and meditate, hopefully, unto the reception of Holy Communion on these beautiful verses from Holy Nihilus, whom we ask to pray for us. Nihilus writes, "You left us, O Father Benedict, a divine norm, perfect guide for monks, and you gave us the regula, the rule. Following it, we cry out to the Savior, O God, our Redeemer, you are truly blessed."